and welcome to the very first Wee Dram from the third half, a short monthly blether where two ageing Scotsmen try to make sense of people, planet and progress. I'm Scott Hamilton, and in this episode I'm joined by my pal, technologist, diaspora champion and fellow professional curmudgeon Steve O'Donnell, who opens proceedings by telling me he's got the cold. Exactly the kind of uplifting start I had in mind. Thanks, Steve. From there we roam from flu jabs to cutting-edge drug discovery at Glasgow University, from Scottish innovation in unicorns to Scotland dreaming of the World Cup and England's women actually winning the Rugby World Cup. We also tackle a tough but essential topic, online sextortion and the work of the NSPCC, before ending, inevitably, with Britain's broken trains. It is quite Scottish. It's not always Scottish. There's a lot of good listening in there. Pour yourself something decent. Here's our first Wee Dram.
Just a heads up before we begin, this month's Wee Dram takes us into some heavy territory, including the rise in online blackmail targeting children. We talk about it openly because it matters, but it may be difficult listening for some people. So when you get there in the conversation, you'll know. And if you or someone you know needs help, the NSPCC is there at nspcc.org.uk.
Hi Steve, how you doing?
No bad. I've got the cold though.
Oh my God, no bad. I've got the cold. What? This is our inaugural Wee Dram, celebrating the world of uplifting, and you start with, oh, no bad, I've got a cold.
Well, it's the tail end of the flu, and it's an annual event for me. I don't know about you, Scott, but do you get the flu jabs?
I do. Well, I'm a bit like most things in life. I'm not very organised, so I think I've had a couple and I've not had a couple, but I'm due one soon.
So this is the first year I've not had a flu jab, and I've had the flu, and it slammed me. But actually, every year in the past when I've had the flu jab, because unlike you, I am organised about these things.
Well done.
I get the jab, and literally the day afterwards, I've got the damn flu. It's as if the jab gives me the flu. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's the case that's exactly what it does. It gives me the flu. And because I suffer a bit with pollen in the summer, I get all choked up here, and I'm coughing and spluttering, and it's awful. This year was particularly bad, and I've considered this now, and I think I am going to get the flu jab and just have a sort of half-baked dose of flu rather than a full-on horrendous COVID-style flu.
Do you think? But is this not conditioning? Are we launching a Wee Dram here with a conspiracy theory that this is what, you know, we want to inject you with the flu, and then you've got to go and buy lots of meds? And I would just like to throw in here that your dad would be very upset because you've become a southern softie now. Too many years in the southeast, and you know you're kind of like, oh ma, I've got a cold.
Aye, it's right. I remember when I first moved down, I phoned up Ma back up in Uphall, just outside Edinburgh, and I said to her, oh, it's a lovely day down here. I've had to take my jacket off because it's so hot. And she says, it's snowing. And that's normal, right?
It snowed and everybody's still in shorts and t-shirts.
No, but it was snowing in Edinburgh, and I was in London taking my coat off because it was too hot. And the climate difference of that 400 odd miles is really quite staggering. Scottish weather's famous.
Oh, aye.
You've either got the midges, or if you've got some dreich thunderstorm that's coming in that just makes you wet through and through, regardless of what you're wearing.
It's just those weeks when I go back up north, and you know, luckily enough, my folks are still alive, and there's those weeks in January where it's just dark all day, you know, and it's depressing, you know. It just kind of sucks the life out of you. There's never a bit of light in the sky, but then, you know, 3 months later, it's, you know, gorgeous long days in Edinburgh.
Now, we were talking about the flu a moment ago, and about vaccines and things. And here recently I've been learning loads about DNA and drugs, the bad kind of drugs rather than the good ones that you get from the guy that comes dressed up as a pizza delivery driver.
Don't know anything about that.
No, of course not. And how drugs are actually created. Because I've been with the Scottish Business Network. It's our 10th anniversary, and we're kicking off with an accelerator, a business accelerator in Scotland, to try and help Scottish businesses actually get going. And as a result of this, I've been talking to some of the universities. And one of the universities is Glasgow University. What a place. Absolutely amazing scientists and engineers in Glasgow University producing some amazing stuff. Another time maybe we'll talk about quantum sensing. Right? Quantum sensing, right? So just file that one away. The only thing we can say about quantum is that nobody understands it, not even the experts.
Really?
Yeah, it's not rocket science. Rocket science is simple Janet and John type stuff compared to quantum physics. And anyway, I digress. So coming back to drugs and viruses and so on. So we've got a human genome, and years and years ago, we sequenced the human genome. It was a big thing, if you remember. You do remember. And then we've done things like cloned sheep and done all sorts of great DNA stuff. But one of the things that's happened over the last few years is with artificial intelligence and an international focus, all of the proteins in our DNA, not only have they sequenced them, but they've pretty much worked out what they do.
Wow.
So if you think about it as a genetic fingerprint that tells you who you are and who we are, they can say this little bit of protein here, that impacts Alzheimer's disease, and that one over there, that's for Parkinson's. And this one here, when it gets turned on, it causes you to have malaria, and so on, and so on, and so on. So there's all these things that cause tendencies, makes us Scottish or not, as the case may be. But so what actually happens when drug companies are producing drugs, and this is something I learned in the last few weeks, what they do is they produce peptides, the little bits of protein, and they try and find the right jigsaw piece that fits in with the piece on our DNA, and it either switches it off, switches it on, attenuates it, or accelerates it. So you've got the opportunity to tweak, if you like, with the bits of DNA. And that's what vaccines and cures and other drugs actually do.
But where does it stop? So I do find this fascinating, but it's almost like Highlander, Who Wants to Live Forever type thing, like we can fill every little gap, we can fill every little flaw, we can modify, is that good for society generally, and what impact does it create on society and the economy? I know that's not exactly what you're saying, but when I think about that kind of evolution of the science and what we're talking about here, where does it actually take us as humanity?
Well, we could always go back to the Middle Ages, where the average life expectancy was in the late 20s.
Yeah.
And most people died of something pretty horrible, like bubonic plague or syphilis or something.
No, I would not. I'm not condoning such things, Steve.
No, I hope not. Yeah, but there's an awful lot of wasted opportunity. What was it? Was it the Romans who said, "Those who the gods love, they take early." And so you end up losing an awful lot of great people, great individuals, men and women, who've got potential for the rest of their lives, and they're taken away by an illness, something that shortens their life, and the pain and agony that causes. And you and I are old enough now to have experienced death of aunties and uncles or mums and dads. And, there's a time when it's time. And actually it's a blessing when it's time. And they're taken away because it is time. Yeah. What I think I'm talking about here is maybe helping us to get to that time and actually live a full life as husbands and fathers and grandparents, and actually be part of our future and part of our past at the same time. And so I think I would argue that the advances that we've seen in modern medicine are amazing. Mind you, there are some Frankenstein stuff that happens where you think, really? Is that really what we've come to, where we're doing something so bent out of shape that you think, is it actually worth living for with that sort of stuff going on? Now, I don't know if you know, but I've got some bits of metal in my heart, because I had problems with my heart muscle, and the cardiac arteries got choked up. Sign of a misspent youth, probably. But
Scottish youth.
deep fried Mars bars. I mean, what can be wrong with that? Okay, deep fried pizza. And anyway, so I ended up with some stents in my heart, and basically, if this had happened 50 years before, I'd be dead. I wouldn't be here today. And I've now had at least another 15 years as a result of having this intervention. And I think it's a great thing. But we're drifting. Getting back to the topic in hand, getting back to this idea of how modern medicines are generated. And so, remember I said that we've got these little peptides that can switch things on and off, and they can attenuate them, or they can amplify them. And what drug companies do is they go off and they try to find a clinical candidate, something that they can take into clinical trials to prove that it works. And the first thing they've got to do is in a test tube, before it goes anywhere near an animal or anywhere near a human, they actually produce these, and then they test them. And it takes a long time. It takes thinking years of work to go through hundreds of thousands of different peptides to find the one that's going to switch something off or switch something on. Pretty interesting. And what these guys at Glasgow University have done, which is utterly staggering, is they've produced a technology that allows them to put hundreds of thousands of peptides in a test tube together and identify the one that actually works in a day. Okay, guess what? They've got $5 million from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, but they can't raise any commercial money. They can't raise any money for growing the business. And it's not because they're not smart, because they are. They're really smart. It's just that they've never actually run a business before. They've never actually thought about SEIS or EIS funding, or angel investors, or Series A and Series B, and actually doing what real businesses do in raising money. And so I've been actively involved in one side learning about all this technology, and on the other side actually helping them to make sensible choices about how to grow the business.
And is this not our life in a nutshell, or certainly one aspect of life where we meet quote unquote businesses, entrepreneurs, academics with fantastic ideas, and you go, oh my goodness, this is just life changing. But they can't boil a kettle, or find their way to the toilet or whatever, and you're kind of back to real basics. And you do wonder how many great ideas fall by the wayside by, just over enthusiasm or or just not, as I say, not, as you said, not knowing how to run a business, or just go and raise some funding for it. I mean, I'm amazed you can get $5 million from the Bill Gates Foundation, but you're struggling to get any commercial funding. There's kind of something fundamentally wrong there, isn't there?
Well, you would think so. And it's largely because the ecosystem that surrounds university research is not designed like in the United States to seamlessly bolt in to an entrepreneurial support system where the best academics and the best entrepreneurs come together and they identify the new technologies and new science that's actually able to drive new businesses, new industries even. And then they feed them. They're designed to work together. In the UK, scientists are incentivized to publish. So they do the work, they publish, and then guess what happens? Somebody in the US picks it up and they exploit it. There's so much innovation that's created here using our tax money, our research facilities, our super smart people. And in Scotland and in England, for that matter, we attract some of the best in the world to our universities because it's something that we're really good at. Financial services and universities, we're world class at. If you have a look at the top 10 universities in the world, you think, oh yeah, they're all going to be in America. Most of them are here.
Yeah, so it's a drain. So we're actually a kind of brain drain to an extent that everything kind of.
But we do not get the economic benefit, the factories and the businesses and the employment and the tax income that comes from that, because the ecosystem is it's just not there. It's just not there in one place. Now, it's actually relative because we've got people whinge about our tax system. And they say, oh my God, our tax system's really unfair. And, all of our billionaires are running away. Well, good riddance, frankly. We've got SEIS and EIS. We've got entrepreneurs relief. We've got the Innovate. We've got all these things that are sponsored by the government. That's all about accelerating new ideas and bringing them to market so that we can create jobs. But it's incomplete. Getting pre-seed and seed stage money is relatively straightforward because, if you've got SEIS, you get, you get 50% of your money straight back. You put 10 grand in, you'll get 5 grand back in your tax. You're now carrying 5 grand for a 10 grand investment. That's a big advantage. You've got, you've basically doubled your outcomes.
Yeah.
And then EIS, that's 30%, 250k for SEIS, 3 million for EIS. Really generous, some of the most generous early stage funding opportunities anywhere in the world. But what happens is it all falls off a cliff. So you've got loads of businesses that maybe we're making them a bit too strong by giving them all this early stage money, and then they reach Series A where they want to raise the next round, and they don't get it because we don't have that ecosystem. Even businesses like 3i, investors in industry with big public companies successfully for years, 70% of their money in one Spanish company that's in difficulties at the moment. And so their share price has absolutely collapsed. So our financial services ecosystem is a bit broken. That gap between seed and Series A. Now, once you get past Series A and you're actually growing, you've proven the fact that you've got a good business. There's all sorts of businesses that will help you to move ahead and actually accelerate your growth. But there's this valley of despair that businesses have got to get through in order to move on. And I think that's where the universities are.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when I talk to some startups and fintechs about funding and stuff like that, and I remember talking to Tomas, our mutual friend Tomas O'Leary from Origina, said, you need to go and get money. He said, you can either get money by selling stuff, find some customers, that are going to buy your product, or you can go and raise some funding, right? And my sense is there's a lot of people who hide behind the funding and forget that they've got to go and sell something. So it doesn't matter how much funding you've raised, because the fact that you have raised funding, people are going to want return on that funding at some point.
Of course.
And it comes back round to you're going to have to sell something. And if I come back to some of the entrepreneurs and the startups and stuff like that's the kind of mountain which is in front of them, So it's only deferment of selling as opposed to avoidance of selling completely. You got to go and get your product out there at the end of the day.
Well, this pharmaceutical firm has actually sold £4.6 million with £4.6 million of revenue, okay? But they still can't raise, okay? So something fundamentally wrong here, and we're going to fix it. Anyway, so I thought that was really incredibly interesting.
Fascinating. And I want to come back to the Scottish Business Network, but you did mention something there which pricked a thought in my mind when you were talking about stents in your heart and everything like that, and that was that my dad was in hospital for a couple of weeks there, and just at an age, and he was in the cardio ward at Monklands District General Hospital. Big shout out for them in the NHS that do actually good work.
They do damn good work.
And he was in hospital when Scotland were playing Denmark, in their playoff
in a hearts
in a heart ward.
They shouldn't have had it on. They should not have had it on.
I tell you, I was at home with my 86-year-old mother and my brother watching the game, and it was like, oh, way! Yes. I've never watched a football match that's been so up and down. And I looked across at my mum at one point and I thought, I hope my dad's not watching this, because I can imagine that every machine in that cardio ward in the Monklands is going ping, 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 ping. I was half expecting to go in the next day and half the, God forbid, half the beds to be emptied. Like it was just too much for everybody's heart to take.
And the commentary was actually pretty good too. I'll come back to this, but I don't know if you remember. Are you old enough to remember when Glasgow Celtic won the European Cup?
Aye.
And the English commentator said, Glasgow Celtic, the first English team ever to win the World Cup. And 1.5 million TV sets flew out of London.
The streets of Glasgow, the tenement windows were all smashed from the tellies getting thrown out. I was in a rather opportunistic way trying to capitalise on this for charity, because I was, as you know, I did a sleep out for charity the other week, and I had been kindly given a Ryan Christie signed football top. Ryan Christie, who plays for AFC Bournemouth and also Scotland. Mm-hmm. And the day after, I was back on the social channel saying, you now have a chance to win Ryan Christie's shirt through this raffle. Ryan Christie, who could win the World Cup next year with Scotland. He could score the winning goal in the World Cup next year.
What's this could? What's this could?
Sorry, Will.
Of course. Every Scotsman has absolutely discounted the fact that Scotland's winning. Okay. Everybody's trying to buy final tickets. It's just a fact.
We're all there already, aren't we?
The Americans have not got a clue about what the impact of this is going to be. The whole of Scotland's going to drain out and arrive somewhere in America.
Buy shares in Scotch whisky in America and tartan, because it'll be flying off the stalls. But actually, on a serious point, and I think it's good for a nation, isn't it? And what does it actually do for the mood? And I want to come on and talk about your work with Scottish Business Network, because we have got, and listen, we shouldn't make this too tribal and too Scottish, albeit it's two balding, aging Scottish, businessmen, having a blether over a wee dram. But we have got such a strong identity as a country and such a good feel-good factor when these things come to fruition.
The Scottish culture is unique. I think actually, because we surround this much stronger country, England. The Welsh, the Irish, and the Scots have unique, differentiated cultures. I mean, the Welsh are all about singing, and the Irish, I don't know, what is it, drinking Guinness probably, and leprechauns. But the Scots, I mean, I saw somewhere in a T-shirt, I'm sure it was on Instagram, and it said, I only support two teams, Scotland and whomever England is playing. And it sums it up, doesn't it?
So we're now alienating the English and the Irish. Those drinking.
They all know what we're like, so it's okay.
They do know what we're like. I think we've got a lot of latitude in in these states as well. But the counter of Scotland qualifying and to be winning the World Cup was that England actually won the Women's Rugby World Cup last month, which
the Lionesses are absolutely outstanding.
Oh, big shout out!
Absolutely, the girls have got it. They play a more interesting game. It's more exciting. There's much more skill, I think, rather than just brute force. They've fundamentally changed gender politics and sport in one fell swoop. Really proud of them.
Yeah, and it was. Listen, I love to see the crowds going out and everything like that. There was a massive feel-good factor. I mean, you live in London, I live in the southeast, but I just loved it. I've got a young girl across the road that plays for one of the local rugby clubs. Like they're out there following. The stadia were absolutely packed out, and we get swept up. And as you say, there was an excitement in it. And lest we forget that the England the England women's football team have won the Euros, as well. So
no.
The achievement is brilliant, and it's good to see that the money getting channeled in. It's good to see the crowds coming out, and I think the standard of play is now exceptional compared to where it was like 5, maybe 10 years ago, and their commitment to it is phenomenal.
It is, and there's one sign I think that's really powerful. If you go and look at the crowd at a women's game, it's 50-50 men and women. And that, I think, just shows how embedded female team sports has become in our culture.
Yeah. So big shout out to them. Unfortunately, Airdrie are still bottom of the league, so I'm going to skip on to that. I think when we have a wee dram in a couple of months' time,
Yeah.
and Airdrie are back up to mid-table and avoiding that sort of dogfight at the bottom of the league to avoid relegation and playoffs, I'll talk about Airdrie a wee bit more. But we've changed their manager, and I always think when you're at the bottom of the table, the only way is up, unless you get relegated. Then it's down again.
Well, there you go.
So listen, let's talk about Scottish Business Network, because we've chatted a couple of times over the last couple of weeks, and you've been jumping in and out of taxis, and then you've been online, you've taken up some new presidential role or whatever it is with Scottish Business Network, and doing the great work of our fellow countrymen. So what is it that you're actually doing now, and how does that sort of like fill your diary?
Well, it's really interesting. I have a portfolio career, so I do loads of different things, and Scottish Business Network's one of the more important ones. And we do charitable work. We bring the Scottish diaspora together from around the world, and we create connections, because when you meet a fellow Scot in an airport lounge somewhere like Singapore or whatever, you're immediately, you've got a connection. You're going to have a conversation. You're going to try and help each other out. It's part of our culture to be welcoming. And what the Scottish Business Network about is it's a really nice form of the Scottish mafia. We're all working together for a common end. And there's actually loads of members who were not born in Scotland. One of my pals was born in Karachi, and he's a member of the Scottish Business Network. He's got a Glasgow accent for sure. But you don't have to be born, and you don't have to be male, stale, and pale to be a member. And there's something that we've been doing recently in association with Scots in London. Now, I think I might have mentioned this before, but London is Scotland's third city. Possibly London is Scotland's second city in terms of population. There's so many Scots here, and they're not all just in doorways wrapped up in an old sleeping bag. There's loads of really successful Scottish business people here, chief executives, chair people of great businesses. And it's true also around the world. And we've got connections all around the world. So something we've been doing with Scots in London, which is a combination of the Burns Society, the London Scottish, in fact, London Scottish and Scottish Business Network had a drink session earlier in the week, which was last week actually. It was great. We had a really good session, a really good turnout, and a great conversation about growing businesses. But the thing that's happening at the moment is the St Andrews Book Festival. Now, this is absolutely stunning. Hugh Pym, who's one of the BBC journalists, he's married to a Scottish lady. He's leading it up, and we've got great authors like Irvine Welsh, Val McDermott, Nicola Sturgeon, loads of Scottish authors who are coming down to England, and they're talking about their books. And the festival's fantastic. We had one about 100 games at Murrayfield, and we had some of the best rugby commentators and rugby players on the stage talking about the book and talking about their experience playing at Murrayfield and how magic Murrayfield is. And actually, isn't Murrayfield magic? Murrayfield is magic for the Kiwis, for the Welsh. It's a completely unique place. And then we had another one about Lockerbie, about the Lockerbie disaster, the terrorist attack where that 747 blew up over Lockerbie and took out hundreds of lives, including poor innocents on the ground. And so the backstory to Lockerbie, was it really the Libyans who actually did the blowing up of the plane? So massive event being going on. Dozens and dozens of authors who come down to London to celebrate, and it's looking like it's shaping up to be another Edinburgh Festival, but based in London. So Scottish culture is really pushing across the world. Go to Japan, walk into a department store, and you're going to find whisky and tartan all over the place. It is a high quality brand. I don't know what it is about that, but it seems to be that's what people want. Scotch whisky industry is quite phenomenal in terms of its reach and its throughput.
I was in Japan earlier this year and I did sample some Japanese whisky and think that was very nice.
Well, they learn from us, and
they did learn from us.
In many cases, actually, I have to say, even as a Scotsman, that they've improved, because some of Tobermory is Tobermory, isn't it? I'm thinking of the Japanese whiskey. It's very good and very drinkable.
Yeah.
But what is it now? They say that copying is the greatest form
of flattery.
It is, isn't it? You know.
They'll probably just exploit it and make more money out of it than what we did, but that's okay. We don't mind as long as we're happy and poor and drunk. Or is that just the wrong stereotype? Well, now that we've mentioned deep fried Mars bars, deep fried pizza, whiskey, and just being happy being poor, that's it. We've ticked all the boxes. But with a wealth of knowledge and innovation, and actually, you know what you said earlier about the universities and stuff like that, we have, get such a strong history of invention, haven't we, in academia? This is not a new phenomenon. Sorry to just dip back to that, but as you were talking there, I was thinking that is what this country, and not just Scotland, but these isles are famous for.
Absolutely, and Scottish innovation. I mean, the telephone, Alexander Bell, anaesthetic, even Peter Higgs, who won the Nobel Prize for the Higgs boson. He's an academic out of Edinburgh University. So, I mean, we've got some incredible folks and incredible skills. And I just wonder, couldn't we make more of an exploitation of these and actually help to build our industries? And the thing that's wrong with the UK at the moment is two things, I think. Too much debt driven by stupidity in the past, and not enough growth. And the growth can come from two fronts. The growth can come from more businesses, more employment, or alternatively, it can come from immigration. So immigrants actually build the economy. And what's happening at the moment with all the bloody flag waving stuff seems to be completely counterproductive to growing our economy.
Flag waving for the wrong idea. And without going back over it in detail, remember last month when we were chatting on the podcast, we were talking about Rolls-Royce, nuclear industry and SMRs, again, leading the way with some of the technology and the creativity and design there as well.
Yes,
are we going to capitalise that to the extent that we should?
So, you know what a unicorn is, don't you? A $1 billion business.
Yeah.
Scotland's got 4 unicorns. I bet that's a shock to you.
That is a shock to me, actually.
4 unicorns, right? Okay, so that's not bad for a wee country with 6 million inhabitants. It's not a bad place to be at all.
A wee country that's going to win the World Cup with 6 billion inhabitants, yeah.
Well, it's already won the World Cup.
Already won the World Cup. So listen, I'm going to switch a little bit here, and I'm going to take us down a bit of a black hole in a news article that I picked up last month, and I think I did go to press in this, and I'd be interested in your perspective on it. So I've done a lot of work with the NSPCC over the past 20 years, mostly fundraising, but, increasingly as time goes on, a bit more hands-on with stuff. And there was a report, a really frightening report that jumped off the page at me last month, late November, that said that 1 in 5 UK parents know a child who's been blackmailed online. So a survey of about 2,500 UK parents also found that, almost 1 in 10 said that their own child had been blackmailed online, which I find a really, really scary statistic, and it's just the lack of awareness about it. The fact that there's no barriers, like we're not calling it out. Are we protecting to the extent that we should? Are we picking up on the signals, and what support mechanisms are we actually putting in place when we find out, that these things are actually taking place? in 2025 on our doorstep.
Aye, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, if we think back to our own childhoods, being a child is a pretty unpleasant thing. People say it's the best time of your life, or adults generally say it's the best time of your life. Well, not necessarily, because the school playground is a bit like the jungle, survival of the fittest, and loads of kids get bullied in the school playground, even when we were young. I think what's happened now is it's become automated, and it can absolutely go viral, and kids get bullied for the most ridiculous things, and then they get bullied online through their social media accounts and so on. And then you've got this AI-driven fake pictures and videos that are springing up. And I was reading recently, I don't remember the poor lady's name, but I think she was an MP. I can't remember which country she's from, but an MP, and she had a deep porn fake of her. It was published online. It was spread around by WhatsApp, and it was devastating for her. She actually won the election that she was going for, but it was devastating personally for her. And the question is, what can we do about this? It seems that we've got fundamentally different culture in Europe, and I include the UK in Europe, than we have in the United States about the freedom of speech. Well, is it freedom of speech to shame someone by displaying naked pictures of them on the internet and passing them around for people to laugh at? Is that freedom of speech, or is it actually abuse? And there's some legislation in the US which basically gives these platforms the right to say it wasn't us. It was somebody on their platform who did this, not us. We're not guilty. And they try and run away from the accountability of spreading this stuff. And I don't know what you think about this. And what's your view on spreading stuff online and the accountability of the social media platforms, these massive businesses that don't need to pay any tax either, by the way?
Well, I think they've got to be held to take to task over it. I think it's abhorrent, like we have to stop this. This is shameful. These are our kids on our doorstep here and now, and I can't remember somebody. I had a conversation with somebody in the past month about this, where unless we fix the problem, these kids will grow up and will unfortunately become part of the next generation of problem, right? Yeah. So we have to raise awareness with people, with you and me, with parents. We have to encourage kids to come out and talk and to share, But the companies have to be held to task. Well, the third thing, isn't you're a CIO and a technologist and industrialist by trade. How do we kind of put more protection in here as well? But how do we hold ultimately point 4 the platforms accountable, or shared accountability as well for what's going on out here? You can't just duck and say, it's okay, freedom of speech, you can send whatever, pardon me, shit around that you want. And when the vulnerable are being exposed, it's fundamentally wrong.
Well, the government's trying to do something with this. Is it the Millennial Act? The one, yeah, okay, which is where if your 13-year-old son wants to go into Pornhub, he's now got to log on and evidence that he's over 18. But any 13-year-old knows that by the simple application of a VPN, he can avoid that. I'm wondering whether isn't there more joint accountability for parents as well, and that if an iPhone was a loaded gun, you wouldn't let the kids play with a loaded gun unless in areas of extreme supervision, like a shooting range or something of the sort, with ear protectors and not doing stupid stuff. And some of these social media platforms are a bit like a loaded gun. They're operating in there, they're very naive, and they're likely to get sucked in. So should children actually be allowed to have a phone? or a smartphone. Are we perhaps going back to the days where a simple Nokia, where you can send text messages and that's about, and make calls, that's about it? I don't know. Millennial.
I've got whenever everyone says that, I have to go diddle-oo doo diddle-oo doo diddle-oo doo doo.
That's right.
There you go, and there'll be many more ringtones as we progress.
Right. So, am I being a dinosaur by saying maybe we should give our kids non-smartphones, because then you've got the safety of being able to make a call and send a text message, but without having to swim in the sewage polluted social media world?
I think we should. I think probably it will end up being less smartphones, as in not quite so smartphones, as opposed to fewer of them. That might be the answer, because I think it's a tap that's running now. It's going to be impossible to switch off. So we just need to control the flow, as it were. And I think there's responsibilities across the whole chain. But to your point, I think educating, I think teachers and what they do. I think the work that, and by the way, just going back to the NSPCC, the work that the NSPCC do is absolutely phenomenal. It's off the scale. Action for Children, who I slept out for the other week. All these bodies that are trying to, support our kids and our next generations. It is amazing. But awareness, and calling it out is just the important thing. And I think it's all our duty to do that.
So, Scott, if some of our listeners are really touched by this and they want to help the NSPCC, how would they go about doing that?
First of all, they can, more than happy that they reach out to me on either through the portal, through the platform, or through LinkedIn. The NSPCC are just very open, as are Action for Children. If you log on the NSPCC website, if you log on Action for Children website, you'll always find a way to either donate, to get involved in fundraising, or to do some charitable work, which, good shout out there for people getting involved. The fundraising is always a thing, especially for people in industry, especially for our peers, is because there's never enough money. And unfortunately, the NSPCC is probably, as a long-term established charity, it's perceived as not cool, it's not sexy. But actually, that's not the point. The work it does is increasingly challenged, and there's less public funding for these bodies as well. So if you can afford to put your hand in your pocket and give a bit of money, great. If you can get involved, join the committee and raise funds, then great.
And you said that if I got this right, that a large proportion of adults know a child who's been bullied online, and many parents have children who've been bullied online. What advice would you give to those adults in getting the children in front of NSPCC to get some help? How would they go about doing that?
Well, I would encourage the adult to talk to the professionals about this, because this is now going outside my jurisdiction, and there are so many people in the help system there, and they're approachable, they're friendly. The hardest thing is picking up the phone. And that's whether you're an adult or a child, pick up the phone, talk to somebody, get advice for what should I be looking out for? How should I be encouraging my child to talk, to open up, and then getting the right support for the child that's at risk as well. So that's NSPCC.org. NSPCC.org.
Good. Brilliant.
Okay, thank you for that tough discussion, but I think very important one. So I'd like to touch on a slightly happier subject, but not that much, which is the trains.
Oh my God!
Did you read again? I read this article on the BBC. It may have been last week or the week before or something like that, and it was about this.
Is this the 7 o'clock train from Manchester?
The 7 o'clock train from Manchester Piccadilly to London Euston, I think it was, has been cancelled.
I've been on that train.
I think we've all been on that train.
Aye. And so tell us the story. What's the ridiculous story?
Well, the ridiculous story, or the ridiculousness of the story, is cancelled but not cancelled. So this train has been cancelled for public consumption, right? But it's still going to run in order to get workers train workers, namely from Manchester to London, in order to get on other trains to run. So you can imagine a train that is probably, I don't know, 90% empty or something like that, get a few bodies on it, but we're not selling tickets for it anymore, in a line, in what must be one of the most busiest lines in the country of anti-trains. And I kind of read this and I thought, oh my goodness.
And wait a minute, that's peak service.
That's peak service. So, that is a moneyed service. That must be...
How much is a ticket? 100, 200, something like that? Single?
I think it's about... Was it not about 180 quid?
Yes.
A single ticket from Manchester Manchester Piccadilly.
Okay. So come on. Who is the smarty that decided this was a good idea?
Well, I don't know. I just think it's kind of beyond me. And you mentioned Japan earlier, and again, this is when I go into my kind of like, for goodness sake, when I was in Japan earlier this year, like they had good trains, they had clean trains, they had cost-effective trains that would hitting all the time. If that train was a minute late pulling in, then there'd be trouble. There'd be a public outcry. Yes. And I'm picking on this Avanti train that's going to be running without passengers from.
But it's not Avanti who did this, is it? It's something like the rail regulator or the folk that run the tracks that insisted on this.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
Network Rail, and can this possibly be true? But then again, I get a train regularly from Reading into London, and which can be a 25-minute journey that on a regular basis runs 20 minutes late. So a 25-minute train journey can take 45 minutes plus easily, overcrowded, very expensive. And then I was in Paris last weekend, and I came back on, lest we forget, what is actually called HS1 on the Eurostar. There's a plaque inside. Not a lot of people know this. We talk about HS2 getting cancelled, but there's a plaque inside St Pancras Station that talks about HS1, the high-speed train, which we actually managed to get a high-speed train to go underwater to connect two countries, but we couldn't get a high-speed 2 to go from the southeast to the northwest. What is wrong with our infrastructure?
Well, isn't it much more about our planning system? We were more interested in protecting bats than actually getting trains to run on time and building the infrastructure. Isn't it true that the UK's cost of delivering these major infrastructure projects is way out of kilt with the rest of the world? And it's largely because of stupid red tape and the planning impediments to get the thing actually done.
But ultimately, yes. So is it the fact that the way that we built the franchises? Is it the competition? Is it is it funding? Is it our inability to manage programs? I'm kind of like,
it's not just the trains though, Scott. Well, it's the roads, it's bridges, it's nuclear power stations, it's everything. The planning system is so dysfunctional that it's a disincentive for anyone to pump money in to actually build infrastructure. Now the trains, you're right. This whole idea, and it's true of the water authorities as well, this whole idea of half privatising things that are natural monopolies makes no sense whatsoever, And not only is it impossible to get the infrastructure upgraded, the costs of tickets on our rail network is off the charts. It's cheaper to take the plane in most cases than it is to take the train.
Well,
how can that be the case?
Well, I've written about this in the past few weeks as well, as you know, when I put my sustainability hat on, and again with my creaking parents 400 miles way north of the border, and I'm flying up again. Well, sorry, I am not. I am going up again on next Sunday, and I could buy an air ticket for at least half the price, maybe a third of the price for what it could to go on the train. How can that be? I mean, it's just fundamentally wrong, isn't it? And I don't know whether it's incentives. I can't imagine it's down to pure cost itself, that we can't, fund a rail system that is the carbon footprint is a minuscule amount relative to flying. and it takes longer, but there's almost a disincentive that I should be going to getting on a plane. But actually, you touched on something about it not being trains. I started on this rant. I'm right on my box here, aren't I? I should be standing up, not sitting down. I go back to about 3 years ago, and when we were living over in Sandhurst, and the pavement outside the house was getting dug up to put in a high speed broadband. I can deliver you a 50 gig or 100 gig or 500 gig of broadband. I was thinking, lad, why would I ever need that? Anyway, hole get filled in. About 3 months later, somebody out digging up again. But, actually coming to close my driveway, couldn't get a car off the drive, laying another cable. And in the space of 9 months, we had 3 cables laid in the same, hole channel outside the house in the pavement, that they just kept digging it up to lay a new cable. We're a different company. This is a new cable. This is a different service. Still, whatever, 500 gig or something like that. And I'm like, how can this be?
Yes. How can it?
The disruption and the inefficiency of it is just off the scale. So to your point, I think better planning and all UK national infrastructure or local infrastructure should be the answer.
It sounds a wee bit socialist, and it's not meant to be, but there are some things in life that are better being mutuals or shared or run by the government. And a really good example is GSM, Global System for Mobile Telecommunications. Okay, Europe mandated the GSM standard for all mobile phones within Europe, and as a result, all the manufacturers started producing GSM handsets, GSM networks. Economies of scale happened. The price plunged, and America had 2 or 3 different standards, and one phone wouldn't work on another vendor's network. So things like roaming and stuff just didn't work. Costs were high. In the end, the Americans had to give in, and it's all GSM over there now. So there you go. Actually standardizing things on a technology that's functional and works is actually a really good idea. And it's, why couldn't we have the first people to put the pipe down for a cable actually have to share it, and the next person that comes along, they could easily contribute 50% of the cost of putting the pipe down in order to share it. Why not? And then the next person that comes along, they contribute as well, and so on and so on, and you end up then with rather than having 57 trains coming into Euston from Manchester at 7 o'clock in the morning, you have one actually runs and it's got passengers on it.
I like that. I like that. I listen. We're wasted. We're wasted doing what we do, Steve. I think we're destined for bigger things. Assuming, going back to the start, that all this kind of medical technology can keep us living long enough to actually cure a lot of the other ills of this country of ours and beyond.
Well, we started off in the wrong place, being born in Scotland, though, of course.
So come on, let's just to wind up. Give me one bit of a nice bit of good news to sort of finish off on the last month. Well, we can't go back to Scotland qualifying or England winning. A nice bit of good news from you.
One bit of good news. The one bit of good news is it's not as cold this week as it was last week. Do you remember it was like freezing point and it was starting to snow and stuff? But now it's, I don't know, is it 10 or 12 degrees, something like that in the southeast? Yeah. A wee bit warmer. And I friends who were brought up in Africa and places where it's 30 degrees centigrade normally, they come over here and they can't believe how cold it is. And I don't know, I think there's something about London when it's cold. It's very cold.
It's very cold, isn't it?
So that's my idea. It's not as bad as it was last week. Okay.
I think on that note, that's such a Scottish thing, isn't it? My good news is it's not as bad as it was last week. I did have a great moment last month, and it was a music month. It was a music moment actually, and a big shout out for a band. I was at a gig in Windsor, And the band, they're an Americana kind of folk band. They're called My Girl the River, and I've just recorded an interview with them last night, and it's going to go up in the podcast, in the next couple of weeks. And midway through it, they started singing "No More I Love Yous," which was Annie Lennox's Grammy Award-winning song back in the early 90s. Now, little unknown fact for people listening to this, they might think, oh, Annie Lennox, No More I Love Yous. Well, it was actually written and performed by a band called The Lover Speaks in the late 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And they then said that the guy who was playing the double bass on stage was Joe Hughes, who co-wrote No More I Love Yous for The Lover Speaks, and then the rights went to Annie Lennox. And I played that album to death in 86, 87. I loved the original album. And I went up to him after the gig, and listen, this gig in Windsor, it was the start of their tour. There was about 25 people in the audience. I went up and I said, Joe, did you co-write that song for The Lover Speaks? And he said, Scott, I was half of The Lover Speaks. I was like, oh my goodness. I was like the teenage fan. I think I threw my arms round him.
Yeah.
And I'd only had one wee dram and said, I cannot believe I've met the man from The Lover Speaks who wrote No More I Love Yous. It became a worldwide hit.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just my little feel-good, good news moment of the last month that actually really uplifted me and put me in a very, very positive place about life.
Now, just coming back to this music thing, we've all got children that are teenage or older, and have you noticed the shame that your children feel when they recognise that you like the same music as them?
Absolutely. And then they're like, oh no, I've got to ditch that. I've got to move. Unless you offer to take them to the gig.
Aye.
Aye.
Like the Pistols or some of the really old stuff, and they're playing it, and you say, oh yeah, I saw them live at the health centre in Edinburgh in 1972. What?
And then they say, aye, Dad, they're playing next month. Can you take me? And then you get there and they say, right, Dad, can you stand up the back while I'm down the front? And you're thinking, yeah, that's probably the best thing for my knees. In fact, I'm just going to go and see if I can find a wee bench up the stairs to sit on. Steve, great to talk. Slán Java.
You too. Cheers.
And we'll catch up next month, eh?
Slán Java.
Cheers, buddy.